stop the broadcast, and when you're ready, just go ahead and click go live again and start just like you were.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone, or again, good morning. Yes, so on occasion I have difficulties with the technology of it all, but I think I'm up and running. So anyway, thank you all for taking your time to be part of the presentation today. I know everyone is busy, and so we hope that this information will be helpful not just for folks who are applying for positions within higher ed, but for folks who want to get into higher ed, folks who are currently in higher ed and want to move up, and for administrators and for folks who are doing a variety of jobs and carrying out responsibilities within higher ed as well. So we hope this is going to be worth everyone's time, and we will get started, and at the end I'll have some questions that I will be happy to answer as well. So with that, again, today's objectives, really kind of focusing on the hiring process within higher ed. I think that the process can be a mystery to some who are outside of higher ed. The process can be a mystery to some who are in higher ed. And so we'll go over kind of briefly how that all works for faculty and staff. Also what applicants can expect and how to be prepared for success when you're applying for a position within higher education. The various rules and regulations that govern the hiring process. There are a series of federal and state laws that we'll touch upon briefly. Again, you know, most of this we could take one of these bullet points and spend some considerable time talking about, but we don't have that much time, but just a little just to kind of become familiar with it. We'll talk about the value of diversity, especially within higher education, and some tips and guidance for institutions to ensure they're attracting and retaining the best qualified faculty and staff. All right, so with that, the hiring process itself. So typically on a college campus, the staff search process goes as following. Now there could be some variations, keep that in mind, but typically how it goes is there'll be a opportunity for a position. So a department, unit, college, whatever it is, they have funding for a position, a person has left, there's new funding, whatever it might be. So what can happen at this point is, and I encourage folks to, as we're thinking about replacing the person who has just left us or a new position, to really pause and think about, are we replacing the person who's left with exactly the same skill set, with exactly the same focus, or is this really an opportunity for us to step back and say, okay, maybe our mission has changed, or maybe the discipline has changed a bit, or maybe something has occurred that will allow us to have a different direction or different focus with this position. And so instead of automatically a person's left and so let's fill that position the same way the person who left was filling it, maybe we step back and review that. So assuming that we've done that, what you're likely to see is a job announcement that is posted. You will then, there are typically, I don't know, nowadays there's hundreds of applicants. We've had up to 800 applicants for one position. And so folks are applying for the positions, right? One of the points here I would stress, and again, this may or may not be applicable depending on where you're applying and the system they're using, but I would encourage you to apply early in the process. It may not matter, but at least from a common sense perspective, possibly, the notion of, well, I'm the 5th candidate that's being reviewed versus the 800th candidate. Now, I hope and expect, as you should as well, that each candidate is being reviewed fairly and throughout the whole process, but I just, in myself anyway, I'd like to be more upfront than I am kind of at the tail end of the review process. So anyway, review process is undergone. There is a weeding out, or weeding in, if you will, a screening out of applicants along the way. And so this can be done in a staff search, typically by one or a few other folks who are going through and reviewing all the qualifications in the job announcement. At that point, what can happen is a telephone screen. And let's say we've identified 10 people out of the 206 that applied, and we want to know more about their qualifications. We want to talk to them. So we would then develop a series of questions. I would encourage the committee or the person who's asking these questions to have a typed set of questions out. The important part of this would be that we're treating each applicant the same, fairly, and interviewing them in the same manner. And one of those things in terms of the telephone interview that can occur is, let's say we have 10 folks that we're interviewing. and 7 of them are internal, and 3 of them are external. They could be anywhere in the country or the world. We should always do a telephone interview by the telephone, meaning if the applicant is right across the hall from my office, we're still doing a telephone interview of that person. And here's why. So let's say, for example, I am talking to my screen in a big microphone. So I have no idea if this is of interest or anything else, right? I assume it is, but I have no idea. The same is true for an applicant. So you're doing a telephone screen. The person on the other end of the phone can't see the search committee or their hiring official. They don't know if you're sitting there disengaged. They don't know if you're rolling your eyes, whatever it might be. And so that disadvantage should be the same for everyone. Even if that person is right across the hall from me, I'm still going to give them a call and do the telephone interview that way. Again, it's fair for everyone. So the process continues. We've done the 10 telephone screening interviews. Then we have invited typically 3-4 people maybe to campus for the visit to campus. You're likely, depending on the position, to spend a lot of time with a lot of folks, some committees, some individuals, going out to dinner maybe, having lunch, whatever it might be. And then the process goes from there. It can take a while. It could seem like things aren't moving, but behind the scenes they very much might be. And then a person is offered the position. That's the typical search process. The faculty search process can be very similar, but there likely to be obviously more faculty involved, and there's likely to always be or most likely be a search committee. This may be true for some staff positions as well, but for faculty you're likely to see a host of other faculty who are serving on a committee. A structure can be very much similar in terms of they're looking at the information, they're reviewing the resumes, the vitas, the information, and then they're doing maybe a telephone screen and inviting a few folks to campus, do a job talk, those types of things. So there are similarities and differences, but some of the core structure will remain the same. One of the things I'm often asked is kind of the transition into higher ed. So I came to higher ed from the federal government, and so at least from my perspective, the transition wasn't a huge deal. And I had investigated universities as well, so I kind of had a sense of their culture and some of the norms. But also, from the private sector, it can be different. From the government, it could be different. And also, if you're just reentering the workforce, there could be a difference. And so some things to keep in mind. The colleges and universities really differ in their mission. And so this can be very much true where, let's say you're applying to a Research One large institution. Their focus can be research, it could be patient care, there could be a variety of things that school's main mission is. Let's say you're applying to a smaller school, a liberal arts school, a community college, whatever it might be, their focus may be very much different. And if you're within higher ed, you will have a sense of that. If you're not within higher ed, you may not. And so just a reminder that doing a lot of research and trying to get a sense to the extent you can, especially as an outside candidate, of what that school or university or that mission is about can be very, very helpful to you. Especially, let's say that you're a faculty applicant and you really have an emphasis on your teaching. Well, that will be of great interest to all the schools, including the large research schools, but also to the liberal arts schools as well. And so you may focus on your commitment to teaching or commitment to the students type of thing. Again, the same is true for a larger institution, but there'll also typically be that research component with that. Having said that, even within each school or college or university, there can be different work cultures. So you're applying to one university, let's say as an example, and you've applied to different units or schools within that campus. There could be very much of a different culture within each of those schools and colleges within those departments. And you may be limited in terms of your knowledge unless you're an internal applicant, but again, doing the best that you can to try to figure out what's really the mission of this particular unit. And that should be on their website, citing their mission statement back to them if you get a phone interview, or in your resume or in your cover letter, kind of tailoring what you're doing to what they want, I think is always a great idea. I've been surprised with and I know that folks are people are desperately wanting to work. I understand that, and want to move up and are very dedicated to their careers. That is very understandable. I find sometimes that folks will apply a lot of places, but sometimes won't give maybe as much detail or attention to a particular cover letter. And so let's say I have 50 applications out there, and I'm waiting for one of those 50 or several to call me back. To me, it's not so much the number versus the quality of the presentation that I'm putting forward. So, for example, I've reviewed a lot of application materials for candidates, and I've been surprised the number of times like the candidate will say, I am looking forward to the opportunity to working, and then they mention a different university, or don't mention the job that I'm screening, for. And so I know it's just they're busy and they're trying their best to put their best, foot forward kind of thing. But really stepping back and taking time to not just in the cover letter to say, dear hiring official, or I look forward to working in your company. In my mind, I'm like, well, we're not a company, we're higher ed. Just those little things that I think can be very helpful that folks, I understand, can overlook, but I think they're important. So keep in mind as you apply 50 times to a place or whatever the number is, I only see that as a reviewer once. And so this is your chance to kind of show me, okay, this is what this person is about. And so I'm looking for at least some exploration as to what the job is about and those types of things. And so that gets to kind of understanding what the organization is. I like to ask folks, tell me, what interests you in this position. And I'm really trying to kind of understand, have they done some research into the position? Do they know what, the institution's about kind of thing? So if you are hiring, I think that's a good question to ask. If you are an applicant, I think it's a good thing to keep in mind that you are fully prepared for the interview. Also, the last bullet point there, the position itself. I find in higher ed, and this may be true, I've worked in higher ed in the government only, so I can't speak to private sector, but I've noticed that, especially in higher ed, that when you're here and you are doing a great job, and you may be serving on committees with other people from different parts of the campus or whatever it might be, you're getting exposure to different areas of the campus, that the folks who are doing a really, really good job get noticed. And you can see great opportunities within the school and college for that person. And so the point here is that as you apply, there may be positions that you may think that at this point in my career, I'm not sure I want to do this. Or I think my skill set may be a better match for this. All that may be true, and certainly whatever you think is appropriate, but maybe consider if the opportunity presents itself to join the organization in a position that you may not find ideal, but then you can really kind of excel in that position and show that you're excited about that position, but equally excited about doing more and progressing and doing those types of things. So keep that in mind as well. The hiring process, I wanted to just list this, but this shouldn't be a big issue that comes up during the course of an interview, but it might. And so if it does, I thought it might be nice to be prepared for it. But again, it's likely that you'll not come across these questions. But if you do, there's some recourse later on that we'll talk about. So like I say, my reference earlier, if you're a hiring official, you're on a search committee, hopefully you have typed interview questions that you're asking each of the applicant to be, fair to everyone. And one is going to assume that in the typed interview questions you don't have, do you plan to become pregnant in the next few years, right? So just as a side, if your organization has that as a typed interview question, there's some bigger issues there. But we're going to assume that that's not the case, right? Folks would generally know that that's not a good thing to ask, or if you're on medication, that kind of thing. But what can happen is this presents itself in an informal setting. So we're out with the candidate, it's lunchtime, it's dinner, we're asking them about themselves, and we might ask, do you have any children, because we want to talk about how great the surrounding school districts are. So this is impermissible and violation of probably university policy and certainly federal and state laws. And so for institutions, I just remind them that it's a great idea to talk to our search committees, talk to our hiring officials, remind them, and hopefully in your diversity office's website or somewhere within HR or someplace, there are resources that kind of give guidance to this. There could be a search manual, likely there will be. Within that or somewhere there's a list of questions to avoid. And so again, these ones that are listed here are questions to avoid. And again, they can occur in an informal setting. They're not meant to be screening folks out, especially the question about do you have children. Again, it's likely to be trying to talk about the school district. Nevertheless, these are impermissible questions. What should you do if you're asked such a question? That's tricky. I'm not sure that I have any great guidance other than there's recourse afterwards. And I've been in a few situations where some of these questions, not these particular ones, but some have come up. And given my past work, I know that these are not appropriate questions. And so sometimes I'll just joke and say, well, I'm not sure that's appropriate, or that sounds a tad illegal, or I might answer. It just depends on kind of the situation. But you should never feel compelled to answer these types of questions, right? And they shouldn't factor. There'll be a question later that somebody asked about their disability status and what to do about disclosing it. One should never feel that they're disadvantaged by, again, these questions or their medical status or anything like that. And so if they do, there is a course that folks can take, but it's situational and dependent upon what to do if you're asked such a question. Again, it's likely that you're not, hopefully that you're not, but one might be prepared for a question for which you find, even if it's not one of these that's kind of off-putting or what do you do about it or makes you a bit uncomfortable. Think about playing that scenario out and how you might answer it. The hiring process, again, continued. What role does affirmative action play in the process? There are many resources on this topic, and so I won't spend a lot of time, but I think it's important, and there's a link there to an article in Higher Ed Jobs, which I think is a great article, although I suppose at this point I should say I wrote that article, so you may not think it's great, but even if you do or don't, there are many other resources. I'd encourage you to check them out, especially if you're part of a hiring official, if you're part of a search committee, if you're an applicant, if you're on a college campus kind of charged with talking to folks about the hiring process. I think this topic is incredibly important. There are a lot of misunderstandings out there. I get the sense sometimes, let's say you really want a position, you're excited about it, you think you're a perfect fit, and then you don't get it. And then the person who gets it looks different than you do. And so you say, oh, well, that's because of affirmative action. That wasn't me. It's something else happened. That's not true. There is no such thing as an affirmative action hire. You'll hear that sometimes, but that is absolutely not true. And so really the purpose of affirmative action in the hiring process is all about ensuring a fair search process that's open, and in the end, the most qualified person is hired. We'll talk a bit about how you might be that most qualified person and steps you can take. But for now, again, we're thinking about casting that widest net. So instead of, well, we've hired 10 people, but they're all kind of friends of people who currently work there, none of that is appropriate. There are federal expectations as well as state that search process is very fair and open to everyone, that everyone is treated fairly. Again, those impermissible questions aren't asked, and in the end, we hire the most qualified person. So again, if you have more interest in this, I would encourage you to take a look, especially for those who are responsible for hiring or for providing training and guidance to those who hire. There's a lot of misunderstanding about this, and so I think that's probably time well spent. The applicable laws, these relate to the hiring process mostly in the employment process. So you're likely to have a affirmative action office, a diversity office, a office for institutional equity, a office for equal opportunity and access, or whatever the office might be called. You're likely to have one on campus. And the work that they will do in terms of this type of enforcement is very much framed off of these particular laws. If we were talking about student issues today, we might include other laws. For example, Title IX of the Education Amendments, those Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. But these are the laws that apply to employment. And so, again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each one and talk about them in any depth at all, but just so you have a sense of the applicable laws. And equally important, the agencies that enforce these laws. So Whether you're an applicant, whether you're external to higher ed, internal, whether you are a member of legal counsel, a member of the diversity office, or whatever your role might be on campus, kind of keeping these things in mind, the rules about a search process, the role of the federal government, if we're audited or if there's an allegation of discrimination that's brought forward, what do we do about that? What should we be thinking about when we're hiring, when we're promoting, when we're doing all these things that occur within higher ed? We should keep in mind we have our great partners in the federal and state government who are overseeing the work that's being done. And so you'll see here Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Justice Department, Labor, those folks as well. So again, these are the agencies that will oversee if folks have an issue regarding their time in higher ed in terms of employees, their time as an applicant trying to get into higher ed. The agency role themselves, if you feel you've been discriminated against and you want to explore recourse through the federal government, then basically you would file a complaint with one of these agencies. You can locate them on the internet, of course, and sometimes I think online now you can file complaints. When I was in, that wasn't the case, and express your concern. It's completely free of charge. Those folks are very dedicated. They are interested in justice, and they will follow up, they will take a look, and they will decide if discrimination is found. If it is, then the agency will kind of move in and take care of the matter. And I've seen some great stuff happen. I've seen some folks who haven't been treated fairly, who have been brought back with full pay, who have been not considered for employment, but then later received employment, or whatever it might be. So it's just a reminder again for everyone that the work that we do is important, it matters, and we also have our great partners to make sure that we're doing it in a manner that's consistent with expectations. And equally important as the law is the university's commitment to its core values of treating everyone fairly. You know, I would guess that in any university mission, and certainly companies as well, but for university mission, whatever the mission statement might be, the underlying core values include a commitment to fairness, include a commitment to diversity in all of its aspects, all of these things for which make a college campus and a university setting unique are embedded in the core things that an institution believes in. And certainly civil rights and diversity is a big part of that. Internal investigative process, again, I won't spend a lot of time in the detail of it all, but as a reminder, you're very much likely to have a diversity office on a college campus. They are required in terms of enforcement of university policy. And these are also, just like our federal partners, equally dedicated folks who are interested in making sure that everyone is treated fairly. They do a lot of stuff which we'll talk about in a bit, but one of the functions that they're likely to serve is the investigative function for civil rights. And again, this could be in a community college or in a smaller liberal arts school. This could be one person. In a larger institution, it could be a group of folks in an office. Whatever the structure might be, you're likely to have a person. They could be embedded in HR, they could be in the president's office, the provost's office, wherever they might be. But you're likely to have a diversity office that is tasked with many things, including conducting these reviews. And again, this would be for folks who have concern. And let's say it's outside of the hiring process. Let's say that you are in your position, you've been working for some time, and you just don't think that you're being treated fairly. And you think that the reason could be veteran status, age, race, national origin, disability, gender, whatever it might be, then this is an office that can go and help address those concerns. So again, something to think about. Also, these offices do a great job of training and outreach, or should be doing a great job in training and outreach, and really try to, in addition to the compliance stuff, really go beyond that and talk about the importance of treating everyone fairly and valuing everyone. We'll talk shortly about how that can really contribute to the campus climate, which then contributes to really every aspect of the community. So again, just a reminder. So the diversity office itself, again, there's a link to another great article on higher ed jobs, as well as other resources that you can check out. And I would encourage you to do that. Again, maybe less so for applicants, unless you're an applicant for this type of position, but for the institutions that are listening and the folks who are working in this work and other administrators, and again, I recognize that I work in a diversity office, so that's my perspective. But I would say that the office is incredibly important. And when I was with the government, when I would investigate schools, I could tell pretty quickly when a diversity office wasn't as valued as it could have been, wasn't provided as many resources as maybe was necessary. And I think that really does impact the climate itself. So if you think about why are folks in a higher education institution? Well, the answer is obviously to teach students. If you're a student, you're here to learn. If you have a medical campus, you are providing service to patients, life-saving service. You're doing research. You're a community college. You are have a strong connection to your district, providing outreach, providing members of the district and surrounding districts education. Could be 2-year degree. You could be providing certificates. I mean, all of that occurs because of the people who make up that environment. And a lot of it cannot occur or can't occur to the best ability if someone's being subjected to, for example, sexual harassment, or if discrimination has occurred based on race or national origin or veteran or disability, again, these things. And so the diversity office itself is really charged with making sure that the campus is accountable to itself, if you will, upholding university policy that prohibits discrimination. And again, outreach and great programming. For offices that aren't as effective, there could be a variety of reasons. What I would encourage, if you're in a position you're either in one of these offices or you oversee one of these offices or whatever it might be, I would really encourage a review of the office to make sure it's doing everything that it can, that the school is committed to the work that the office is doing. And again, I don't mean to sound self-serving since I happen to work in one of these offices, but again, through partnership too, like the diversity office working in close collaboration with student affairs or student life, the diversity office working in close collaboration with the schools and colleges developing training that's interactive and interesting. There's all these touch points and collaboration opportunities that can occur that really get to, again, the climate for which we are all in. And so the notion of any aspect of our campus for which folks, one, don't know about what they can expect in terms of an environment free from discrimination, don't know how to proceed with filing an issue or reporting an issue or just wanting to discuss it, I think is problematic. And so again, I don't think a diversity office, we'd all like more funding, and during these difficult times, I think we all have to do our share. But I have seen many instances where offices just aren't getting maybe the resources that they could benefit from. And I would tell any administrator, just keep in mind that even the notion of preventing one lawsuit is going to be cost effective for these types of offices. Let alone, again, the value of talking about the campus community to everyone, talking about our core values, all those concrete things that a diversity office does. So again, if you have more interest in that, I would encourage you to take a look at again, this article and many, many other articles about the importance of a diversity office. I only stress it as much as I have because I can't tell you how many times, in my investigative life, that I went across the country and conducted investigations, and you could just see the diversity office really kind of cast aside, or at least not as valued as much as they would like to be, and as much as the campus would need them to be. So something to keep in mind. All right, so the importance of diversity. So we believe diversity equals excellence, right? And there is a ton of research that gets to that. University officials, government officials, courts, a lot of folks have talked about the importance of diversity, especially in higher education, right? So as one thinks about their career and as it's progressed, let's say you've gone to college or you've not. You've gone to high school, you've gotten a bachelor's degree, master's, PhD, JD, MD, whatever it might be. So as we think about those experiences, we think about like where else do you get an opportunity to really kind of talk about differences that you have, similarities that you have, strong beliefs that you have about a particular topic. You know, it's likely that in an employment setting, your boss is not going to come up to you and say, "Hey, listen, I was just curious. What's your latest thought on, you know, whatever topic is of interest in the public?" That's likely not to occur, right? What's likely to occur is, "Here's your job. I will support you." Hopefully, they'll say that to get it done. Let's do that work. But at a university setting, this is where the vibrant discussions come forward. This is where students in a classroom setting can have great discussions, outside of a classroom setting can have great discussions. And so this is why I think folks recognize the importance of diversity, especially in a college campus, but certainly everywhere. And so the folks that value that, I've happened upon some institutions that I think could maybe put more effort in. And a lot of times institutions, very much to their credit, are interested in doing more in this field, but may not have an exact idea of how to do that. So let's say you're on a college campus now and you're in a diversity office. I think you helping the administration, helping others kind of realize, you serving on committees and all these things, helping them realize everything that the office can do, but equally important, all the touch points to diversity. That are we infusing it in everything that we're doing? Is there accountability? Is there measures? Do we have ways in which we're saying that diversity matters to us, which it should, of course, but we also have ways in which we can show that, which we can document that. And so, again, I think this is important. I think universities and businesses will tell you that a diverse group, and we'll talk shortly about some research, will get you a better outcome to a complex problem. And so, again, general best practices, you know, I am absolutely convinced that taking steps to create a welcoming, inclusive, diverse, and respectful working and learning environment is absolutely the key. I think it's fairly obvious, but I'm surprised over the number of times that this isn't occurring, right? So the manager who may be a bully in the workplace, the supervisor who treats their staff poorly, the faculty member who's a bully to other faculty members, or department chair, or whatever it is. You know, I think we're really, when you see this occurring, and hopefully you've been in these situations, when we've seen a welcoming, supportive environment, when we've been part of something special, you really, you recognize it for what it is, especially if you've been in something that's not so pleasant, and you really don't want to leave it. And so the notion, for example, of, well, this other school is trying to recruit our very best faculty and staff away from us, and they're offering more money. Well, I've seen time and time again at institutions where the money becomes less important versus how I feel and how connected I feel to my colleagues, to my department, to the school itself. And so I've seen surveys where folks will say, you know, well, my boss is just okay, but boy, I sure like working for this university, kind of thing. And that's what I think we're looking for, this notion of creating that environment that's welcoming. That can be shown in a variety of ways. So I have some examples here. Again, there's a ton more than this, but just to think about, what do our policies say? You know, are they written in a way which should prohibit retaliation, those types of things, but they're written in a way that's easily understandable, that kind of conveys, this is what happens if something happens to you, and we care about that. This business case for diversity. I was going to spend some more time on that, but I don't want to run out of time. But just briefly, the research by Professor Scott Page from the Michigan campus, as well as other research, talks about this notion of, and he does it by a mathematical formula, talks about the importance of diversity, having a diverse group address a complex problem, and that diverse group will get you a better outcome. And so we've developed a business case training program regarding that. If you look at examples of lawsuits, I'll use Michigan as an example again, since I'm here, but like the notion of the amicus briefs from the lawsuits from the Michigan cases in the early 2000s. if you see business leaders, you see military leaders talking about the importance of diversity. Again, these are groups for which are very bottom line. They're focused. They have a task. They're building something and making a profit. They are the military. They're doing whatever. If you read those amicus briefs, these friend of the court briefs, you will see them talking about we can't be as effective unless we're diverse. And so I think building programs regarding that and around that research is very helpful. I'm sure that everyone has doesn't feel that they are in any way discriminating against anybody, and they're doing good work. I believe that. But folks also may not be aware of their actions or may not be aware of the importance of diversity. And so talking about that in all of its forms and saying, hey, listen, if you're a bottom line person and you want to see a return on investment, great. I've got some research here that'll talk exactly about the importance of diversity. And so if you're a diversity office, you being able to have those programs readily available to folks, I think, is vital. Never miss an opportunity to provide training to anybody. And again, some examples of best practices that institutions can think about. A lot of effort on many campuses regarding veterans. I think it's a great outreach, and it's multifaceted and really can tie to diversity. And again, I know I can't spend too much time on any one of these, but quickly, an institution is required to ask staff and faculty to identify themselves as veterans for federal reporting purposes. One of the things you might consider is there an opportunity there to develop a mentorship program? So let's say I'm a new student who's transitioning from the military into academia as a student. Well, and I'm interested in physics. And as it turns out, we have faculty and staff who are veterans who are working in the physics department. If we can connect those two, if there's interest in building a great mentorship program, not only to help the student transition from military life to civilian life in academia, but just mentoring them in the field as well for which they are interested in. So these are some things. We do a lot of mentorship programs across campus, and maybe thinking about opportunities that one might not typically think of. And if veterans are the part of that group, I would consider that. I think there's some great stuff that can be done. Always thinking about educational outreach. Your university's non-discrimination statement, for which is required by law, so I know everyone has one, that's a great source of building a training program about discrimination and harassment. Kind of we talked briefly about those laws before. That's a great way to ensure that the campus itself knows when we say sexual harassment, they know what that means. We say racial discrimination, we know what that means in the definitions. So taking the time to, in a very busy schedule, to do things very proactively, I think is time well spent. Diversity Summit, just an idea. Some schools host these annual, every 2 years, whatever it might be, a diversity summit, where you get together faculty, staff, and students, and you talk about aspects of diversity on the campus, and there can certainly be elements of how great of a job we're doing, right? So I don't think it's a bad thing by any means for folks to talk about, here are our success stories. I think it's important to recognize those. I also think it's equally important to note where we have room for improvement. So in my mind anyway, such a summit is really a combination of, here are some great things, and here are some areas of improvement. Here are things where we could maybe put some more resources to do even more, or where we haven't done anything yet, and we can even, there's some more opportunities that are available. Retention programs, again, this is really, we had talked about the notion of gathering data regarding those who have left us, right? So exit interviews. Do we really know why folks leave? And I think that is important, no doubt. But we also stepped back from that thought and said, what about retention programs? Do we ask people why they stay? And so if you have an interest in this, there's some great resources. You could check out some resources online about retention interviewing, where you ask somebody who's working with you, your supervisor and people report to, your department chair, and you talk to the faculty, whatever it might be, and you're asking them, hey, how are things going? And if there's areas that you can address, then you absolutely do. There may be things that just don't. If you ask me, what can make my life better here, I'd say, well, I'd like better parking. Well, that's likely not to occur, and I kind of understand that. But let's say that I'm thinking of, I need some additional time in the morning because I have to drop my child off at daycare, but I kind of don't think my supervisor is going to be supportive of that. So as I think about that, then I start to think about, well, maybe I'm going to go work somewhere else. That seems like they may be a little more supportive. What we would love to have is a retention program where we are talking with some regularity. Hopefully folks feel comfortable talking to you at any time if you're a supervisor, but with some regularity, a more formal structure where you can say, you know, I would really like to explore a slightly modified work schedule time because I have elder care issues right now, or I have child care issues, or whatever it might be. Having that discussion, I think, is important. I am fine with if one of our great faculty staff decides to leave us because they want to live in a different part of the country for the weather. I think the Michigan weather is great, but let's say others don't, and they want it to be a little warmer, for example. Okay, there's not much we can do about that. They want to be closer to family, friends, partners, whatever it might be. That's understandable too. But if we lose somebody because they don't think that we care about them, that we haven't taken the steps to create and show that we have that welcoming, inclusive, diverse, respectful environment, then that's our fault, I think. And so we deserve to lose that person. And so I think it's a reminder that our very best folks, which are all of our folks, of course, everywhere we are, you know, we work with great folks. You work with great folks everywhere. They can leave us. And so the notion of them leaving us because we haven't taken the time to say how much we appreciate them, I think is a missed opportunity. So some tips for employers. Each search matters, should present the institution in the most positive light. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from applicants, you know, in various jobs that I've had, where they say, I applied for this job a year ago. I never heard from them. I assume it's been filled, but it would be nice to know. I see that less and less now with the online applicant system because usually there's a push email that'll say, hey, by the way, you didn't get it. But if that doesn't occur, and that should be worded nicely, of course, but taking steps to remember that even if we're talking to, we have 200 applicants, some of those folks or all those folks may eventually work here. Everyone is certainly interested in working here. We should take steps to make sure that we're showing them that this is a great place to truly work. We are not surprised that they want to work here because this is a great place to be. And so there's opportunities along the way to do that. And again, creating that environment that's positive or negative can really impact the campus community. One thing to consider is, do we know how members of our community feel about the working environment? I'm a big fan, if done correctly, of surveys. Do we have baseline data? Do we have trend data that talks about how folks are feeling at work? If we don't, it may be worth exploring how to do this and doing it. The caution here is, and it's the obvious, but I see it a lot, if you're going to conduct a survey, then you absolutely need to be prepared to address the issues that come forward. Don't ask me my opinion if you're not prepared to deal with the answers that you get, right? And so I think this is a great idea, regardless of the size of your community, to come up with let's say you have 12 schools and colleges, come up with a campus-wide survey that the president's office puts out, whatever it might be. Customize it, sure, to the school or college, but have some core questions and really get at how are things going. There may be bullying in the workplace that we don't know about, and that's creating a lot of turnover. And it's against our core value. It's costing the institution money as well. How do we know about that? Well, we can know about that through a survey. So some things for institutions to think about. I know there's a lot on people's plates, especially nowadays. We're expected to do a lot, and there's not a lot of resources sometimes, but I do believe this is truly a return on investment, this work. The search process itself. So, and I'll get to some questions, so I'll go through some of these quicker, but I'm almost done. Impending retirements. If you look at, so it's not surprising, right? So we have the baby boom generation who is transitioning, who has started transitioning out of the workplace into their retirement, much deserved. Great retirement, great careers. We have folks who are moving forward. Right now, it can feel like there's not a lot of opportunity. I hear from a lot of folks that it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of positions available. Sometimes folks are pausing on going into retirement, waiting a little while for economies, for 401ks, all those types of things. That's okay, because retirements are absolutely coming. If you look at the trend data, it's not just me. I mean, the data shows us that. My advice is to be as fully prepared as you can be. Things are going to be much different, in my opinion, than they've ever been. So the notion of, let's say you have a director, an associate director, an assistant director. let's say typically the director retires, the associate director moves up, the assistant director moves up, and everyone kind of moves up in their career. We're seeing now where the associate director is retiring before the director, and then the director retires right after that. And so you're sitting there at the beginning of your career, mid-career, whatever it is, or you want to change your career, whatever it might be, you being as fully prepared as you can is going to pay off. It may not seem like it now, right? Now it seems like possibly that nobody's moving and I don't have a lot of opportunity. That may be true, but people will be moving. Great folks will be retiring, and we need great folks to take over their positions. And so you're taking a community college course, you're getting a certificate in the latest computer thing, which I could probably use, but kind of incidentally, but nevertheless, you're getting yourself as prepared as you can be, and then those positions are opening up. We've already seen it. We've already seen folks who are starting that retirement process, and we see the need to have folks ready. If you're an institution, succession planning, maybe job sharing. You have 3 folks who are in one unit who are not seeing much growth. You have them work in another unit on your campus for a little while just to see what that department's like. And then when a job opens up, something is available. You are currently working on a college campus, volunteer for committees. That's one of your best ways to get exposure to other folks on campus. You're sitting on a great diversity committee. You're sitting on a committee that talks about the lack of parking or whatever it might be, benefits, all those things that can occur on a college campus. You volunteering, you letting folks know that you have an interest and something to contribute will go a long way with folks thinking about you in terms of, all right, this person's career is here. I see them as someone who is interested in doing additional things. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're satisfied with the position that you have. That sounds great too, just always being updated on things. As an example for which I'm most familiar with, you work in the diversity office. There's a lot of changes with laws and things like that. Staying aware of those is helpful. Also, if you're not selected, sometimes hiring officials will give you feedback. Sometimes they won't. I don't think it hurts to ask. Say, gosh, I'm sorry I didn't get this opportunity. I'm really committed to this. Are there ways for which I could have done a better job, or just things for me to work on? That might be helpful. Also, if you're not selected, I see time and time again where we have 3 finalists, all 3 are outstanding. It's hard to decide, and then we select one. That's nothing against the other 2. In fact, there could be 20 other people who are really, really great, but unfortunately we only had one position. So if you're an applicant and you're not seeing much success, again, I know it's hard not to get discouraged, but if you just stick with it would be my best advice. And keep staying positive and keep applying and keep doing the best that you can. If you're a school, so you think about it, you've gone through that, the department on your campus has gone through that process. They've vetted everyone. They have 3 folks who are equally great. We've only had one position. What about the other 2? Maybe coming up with a way to capture that person's background, their application materials, keeping track of them for other positions that come down the road. So schools and colleges are always hiring, right? And so this person, for whatever reason, we could only hire one, but another department should probably know about these other 2 or these other 10 or these other 20 folks. Someone keeping track of that and keeping records of that would be helpful, I think. Also, as I get to the questions here shortly, I know we started a little bit late, but I'll try to catch up. Again, it is about fairness and equity for everybody. The process is long, and I know it can be difficult, and I hear from folks a lot about just the challenges and struggles. Sometimes folks will meet with me or colleagues and just say, hey, where you're at is where I'd eventually like to be in my career. Could you help me understand how you got there? I love doing those interviews. I love talking to folks about that and then seeing where I can help, or whatever it is, or them at least getting some information and then going about and getting the great experience and then hopefully coming back or whatever it might be. So think about doing that. Make sure, again, that there's processes in place, that you're a valuable addition to the organization. I had a good story, but I'm going to run out of time, so I won't share it. Or at least I thought it was a good story, but I won't share it. But and then taking proactive steps to make sure that the environment is what it should be for everyone. And really good luck, as I'll get to the questions now, but I do want to, again, stress to folks, please don't get discouraged. Again, it's not just me. There are retirements coming. There are people who are coming in and out of the workforce all the time, and there are opportunities. There are opportunities now. There will be more and more opportunities in the future, so continue to look at great websites, Higher Ed, other great websites that list the positions that are available, and apply, and don't get discouraged. So, okay, so some of the questions that I have here. So the first one that I have is, how does the size of a public university differ in how diversity programs are incorporated in the hiring process? For example, a larger university may have more of a significant budget than a smaller community college does. Does this make a difference in how or where programming is incorporated? So I would say no, but I recognize the question, and I also recognize that I've worked at larger institutions that have had more resources. But having said that, I'm absolutely convinced that any school, any size, community college, smaller liberal arts school, medium-sized school, larger school, that the resources itself are less important to me versus the commitment from the leadership from the top. So, as an example, I can create programming on our non-discrimination statement. You know, that big paragraph that says we don't discriminate and list all those things. I myself, folks in my office, or if I was just one person, I can easily create diversity programming regarding that. I can do research and develop a business case for diversity. I don't have to buy that, or I don't have to pay somebody to help me do that. I can do that. And if I don't have the skill set now, I can develop that, right? I can look to see what others done. I can go to conferences. I can do webinar. I can do all these things and kind of get some knowledge. And so I can create that. So to me, the issue is not necessarily the monetary resources, but it can be the personnel resources. We need people there. If you're only one person in an office, there's only so much you can do. But I don't think that the size should necessarily matter. Certainly the structure for a search should remain the same, right? We have same questions, we're treating people fairly. All those things should be the same no matter where you're at. And I am convinced that even for folks that don't have as many resources, something can be done. But again, it takes the college president. It takes the vice president. It takes folks who are kind of overseeing the aspects of the campus, community college, whatever it is, to really have an emphasis on that and say, hey, listen, this is important. We don't have a lot of money to spend here. It's just because, you know, we're cutting back elsewhere as well. But we're committed to this, and we want to do some good work. Can you help us? The answer should be, and if you're a one-person shop, absolutely. Let's work on it together. Let's pull in some campus partners. We'll get a great committee together. Folks will be getting experience on that committee, and we'll put something together. So that absolutely is possible and shouldn't necessarily matter regarding the size of it. Next question, speaking from someone who has a disability, I've been reluctant to identify myself in this category during the application process because I want to be treated equally as other candidates. How do you encourage a physically disabled person to identify that he or she is disabled and then it won't hurt their chances to be hired? So, you know, so I've enforced civil rights laws for a long time, and I absolutely believe in them, and I believe that every person should, without hesitation, if you have a mobility impairment, a visual impairment, and an impairment, one, the school or company should not be asking you about that, although there's some changes with some OFCCP regs that language might change a bit, but that shouldn't be the focus of the hiring process. What should be the focus is your ability to do the job, with or without a reasonable accommodation. So in answer to this person's question, I would identify myself. If I'm visually impaired, whatever it is, I'm applying. And I'm going to be the best candidate I can be, and I'm going to expect at the same time that the school or college is treating me fairly and not using my disability status as a reason not to hire me. And again, if I think that's the case, I am going to exercise my right to have that explored further. But I would not hesitate. Again, that's why these great federal agencies exist. That's why these great internal offices exist for this very work. Next person asks how to address, I'm going to go over just a little bit because we started a little bit, but if you have to leave, I understand. But this will be recorded and available online, so, but I want to try at least get some of these questions in. The person asks, how's it best to attain a higher ed position without having first related teaching experience? The question presumes relevant work experience and academic credentials such as a master's, doctorate, PhD, that kind of thing, MD. So I'm not exactly sure the focus, like if the person's asking how do they get a teaching position with those types of credentials, you know, again, I think it's similar to most positions, kind of perseverance, maybe taking that lecturer position. with the hope of obtaining a tenure track position, but to get in kind of and get build a great reputation maybe through the lecture process. That could be a way to do it. If it's outside of the teaching, it's just the perseverance. You have I do want to stress, as I kind of alluded to, with 800 applicants for a position, there are a really great number of really great folks, and you could absolutely be one of them. And you're not being selected not because you're not great, but we have somebody else who has slightly more experience, slightly more whatever. And so, like I say, it's not. I had said in one of the slides, I know it's hard not to, but don't take it personally. It's not. Again, I've seen great folks who just didn't get hired because there was somebody who was even that much better, but that person was great. So just kind of stay the course and like I say, do the best that you can and recognize that opportunities are coming. This person says, as an African American female, I've been in higher ed since the early 1990s, off and on. Currently, the last 7 years, I've recently obtained my PhD, have been actively pursuing a position such as a dean or provost position. What advice can you provide? So again, very similar. I think obtaining the PhD is a great accomplishment. It shows exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? The person is taking steps to be ready, and now keep applying. Maybe if you know folks who are in the department, know about the field, hopefully the unit, as let's say they're searching for a faculty position, has stepped back and decided, hey, in our field of discipline, we see some change coming. Let's see if there's folks out there who have focused on this particular aspect of the discipline, and that could be very much you. And so, again, just staying the course, I think is always important. And again, not getting discouraged. And I think my time is about up, even accounting for the time that with my difficulties with the PowerPoint. Anyway, but I do want to thank everyone for taking the time. Participating in the diversity and future of the academic hiring process. There's a lot to this. You doing more research if you have an interest in it, looking at the articles, staying connected to various outlets, doing things that you can do, universities, colleges, schools, stepping back and kind of evaluating the things that they're doing, making sure that they're doing everything they can, maybe stepping back and thinking about their institution from an outsider's perspective. How do we look? Are we sending the right message? We believe strongly in diversity as an example, but how would folks know that? So these types of things I think are important. And again, I thank everybody for your participation, and to all the folks who are seeking employment or positions where you're currently at, best of luck to you. Again, don't get discouraged, and good luck to everyone. Thank you again.